Hello,
Hello,
and welcome to.
wisdom for menopause and beyond.
And today we're going to be talking to Alison,
Yeah,
little
she's just
Alison,
known my name. Yeah.
um, about creativity. We
Mm,
talk a lot about creativity in menopause, as well, really past midlife. How
yeah. Yeah.
once we get to a certain point in our life, we have. I think our body and brain changes as well as maybe opportunities change.
Yeah.
I don't think it's just like now you're bored, you can be creative. But tell us more about what creativity means, because I
Yeah.
immediately think of do you know the program where they used to do like the dun, 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 and they should
What
show
take
lots.
part is it? Oh, we did well. You need more. I don't know. I was
Or somewhere where you're being very it feels very drawn
cut
and
and
stick
stick,
and
cut
cut
and
and
stick.
stick.
Yeah.
So tell me what creativity and how you feel that comes into our midlife.
Yeah. It's interesting because I guess it was something that happened for me
Okay.
as I went into my 40s. I started to do things that I hadn't done before and things that I might have actually discounted before. And do you know, like when I was at school, what was being creative? That was doing your art O level.
Yeah.
That was about as far as it went.
Yeah, I get that.
And when I did my art O level, as it was then, before GCSEs, it was almost like you had to produce art that looked exactly like what you were looking at.
Yes.
So it was like like a photograph,
Not a photograph.
But we had to kind of do that. And so if you were doing something, if you couldn't draw something exactly, if you couldn't draw a face, if you couldn't draw a landscape and it didn't look exactly like what you were looking at, then it wasn't successful. And I didn't do that, and it was a bit weird because I actually did manage to pass my O level art, and I had something that was a concept. It's this kind of thing. I did this thing. It was, because you're a teenager. It was a bit gloomy. It was an escalator, and there were various figures on the escalator. So, like from a baby to a teenager to an adult.
Really creative.
Yeah, no, it's a bit gloomy. And then you got an old person at the end with a stick, of course, because that's what old people were. And then at the top of the escalator was a mushroom cloud coming out of it. It's pretty gloomy, but it was conceptual. It wasn't. It didn't. Obviously, I hadn't looked at that. But anyway,
Does sound quite exciting.
yeah. So my art teacher wasn't that impressed, but I did manage to get a B. So there we go. I scraped through. Well, but yeah. So that was all about creative. So I kind of thought, well, if you couldn't do it like that, then you weren't creative. So that was that whole thing that you grow up believing I can't draw, I can't do this, I can't do because it doesn't look like that.
I'm definitely in that world that I was told I couldn't.
Yeah.
And I can't draw, and no one in my family can do it, and I'm just not that. So I've always thought I can't and I won't.
Yeah,
and I shouldn't.
And so the interesting thing was I started by I went to an art class in my 40s. I thought, okay, I haven't done any art since O level. Oh, I could go to an art class, couldn't I? And it was this, I met a couple of really, really brilliant artists. But the one that I remember most is this brilliant. She's an artist and a printer, Anita Reynolds, and I did some classes with her. She does classes at the Newlyn School of Art. Actually, if you're interested, she's still good. She's still got it. But when I went in to produce something, she got us to do really exercises, which she kind of talked about were a bit like warm-up exercises when we started. So there's one where you shut your eyes and you have a pencil in your left hand, in your non-dominant hand, right?
Yes.
And then you draw your other finger down your face. And so your other hand is supposed to draw your face. And you draw on tracing paper. And it was absolutely hilarious because obviously it doesn't look anything like you. And then we all put them on the window. But it was just like, let's just get out of this. You have to reproduce something like that and it has to look like that. Right? So she gets to do this warm-up. And she introduced me to collage and she got me to look at things. And she said, don't look at what it is you're trying to produce, but have a look at it as a kind of light and shade. So I could have me little bits of paper and, it was all about that. And it was like, look at that. What does the shadow make? Oh, it's that shape. Oh, and then that's that shape. So by not concentrating on what I was trying to reproduce, and I took some of Rod's photos and did it from there. There was one where, and then if you stood back from it, you went, bloody hell, that's a tree. but I hadn't concentrated on the tree.
It's interesting because what you're talking about is a whole, it's a whole body experience. It's because I've always thought of art as using your hand, for example, which is the tool, but actually you're talking about almost lighting up a bit of the brain, like for a start using your non-dominant hand, for a start using part of your brain that normally recognizes things in the dark to make a shape rather than recognize, and almost get into that sort of meditative place. It's like
it was great. And we did one exercise where we all started off by doing something on the paper, and then the idea, it was a bit like, you know, what is that one where like Chinese whispers, so then you'd move on and you'd add something to somebody else's painting.
And then I know so the game where you put, put a word and fold it down.
So you do that with art. And what was great was, and then you look at the images that we'd kind of created as a group, you know. So you just so anyway, so it was all very exciting. So it really kind of changed my whole idea about and then of course and that led, as I say, in my 50s to me and Rod putting on art exhibitions. Who would have thought it? Because I'd had this, I've done my O-level art, that's the end of my creative life. And I only got a B, so it wasn't that good. I mean, you know, it was like, my sister was a brilliant artist, but it was like, but I couldn't do stuff like her. But so it was that whole thing.
Tapping into you. So, I mean, what you're saying makes a lot more sense in terms of maturation and understanding ourselves and finding an expression, because you were saying, light and shade worked for you as an expression, where someone else might be something different. But it's almost like it definitely goes with a maturation and understanding life more. And understand it feels like a real I want to say being kind, but these are buzzwords and I really hate that. But being kind to yourself, loving yourself, understanding yourself, they're all buzzwords, but it is that sort of getting to know yourself from a different habit, if you like.
And it was that whole thing of just you know, and then I became introduced to all these different concepts like abstract art and conceptual art and all these kind of things. You kind of go, great. And so it started to make sense to me that I didn't have to produce something that looked like a photograph. In order for me to class myself as creative. So, but then I became aware of so many people, women especially, that I kind of dealt with at that time, were willing to write themselves off. And just say, I'm not creative. I can't do that. I can't do that. And I'm thinking, and I did make that mistake. But Rod says to me, like, just because I can do it, I assume that everybody else can do it.
Or because I can't do it, I assume no one else can do it, and only the odd 2 or 3 people can do it. It's one way or the other.
So it was like that whole thing of saying, well, actually, you are creative. What is it? How do we define creativity? And why is it you say you are not creative? So for me, flower arranging, and actually not that interested. But for some people, they're really good at it, and they just have a natural ability. Like they get a bunch of flowers and they put it in it almost like they just put it in the vase and they look amazing, and you're going, wow. So that's the vision. Or it's like those people that make cakes that look for that they'll spend hours decorating a cake and making it look like a motorcycle or whatever it is, or they'll do all those different things. So, and I'm saying, well, why are you saying you're not creative? Because you obviously are. It's just that you're not doing it within the defines of what you think creativity is.
So would you create it? Would you define it as more than just an art? Is there something, although the end result is arranging flowers, or the end result is a picture, would you define it as something that's something more inner that's going on, and the production happens, manifests in a way? What would you define it as?
So I kind of, being that kind of frustrated academic, well, actually not that frustrated academic that I am, but it was like kind of getting some, I love this one. It's much easier to detect than to define. It's a bit like I know what I like when I see it. And do you know what? Fine. But I do quite like William Wordsworth, a flash upon the inward eye.
Oh, now that's that's even better than I said.
But there you go. Well, he kind of had a few ideas, Wordsworth, a few.
But it is that inside, because it's almost like, as I'm hearing what you're saying, I can imagine being lost in playing an instrument. or lost in sketching, and it almost feels like there's an inner part of you.
Some people describe it as like being in the zone.
Yeah.
You go into a moment and when you're almost not conscious that that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
But you seem to be doing that. And it's sometimes when you look at something, actually, even when I write something sometimes, and I read it back and I think, oh, that's good, isn't it? Who wrote that? So it's that thing of realizing it's almost like having an out-of-body experience, because your conscious brain, it's almost like your subconscious is maybe coming to the fore. So that's quite like that. And here's one, you like this one. This is Arthur Koestler, right? Two disconnected notions accidentally coming together.
Can't get my head around that.
All right, okay, all right. Moving on.
No, I like it. It's good.
Things that you don't think are connected, and somehow in some accident you put them together. It's like making a cake that looks like a motorbike, whatever it is. There are two things that you accidentally
or like you say, I've got lots of piles of paper. Yeah. And I'm now going to make them to look like mountains. It's kind of like,
so it doesn't have to be that. So I kind of thought, so do you know what? That's another thing that I thought, that people could maybe have a different idea about what creativity is, or you could think about that. What do you think creativity is, and why do you think you are or you aren't? So that was one thing.
If you don't think you're creative, because I've always been told that I'm not, so we have these beliefs or thoughts about this, where would you start sort of convincing me, breaking someone like me?
Okay, all right, here we go. Here's the academic here. What did I do? I found a research study.
Okay,
that's always good, isn't it? So, and it says, why is creativity important? Why should we even think about this concept? Is it just a bit like, do you know what, having an art O level, it's a bit meh, it's not useful for anything, is it? Well, so creativity is useful. Why is it useful? Because this study found that it's used, so it's a distraction.
Yeah.
So it might help you avoid some stress. So if you're in the middle of whatever it's going on, does flower arranging help you? Yeah. Tell me about it. My kitchen's being done at the moment. And it's something about, here we go, you'll like this one, as a contemplation tool.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a mental space where you're not thinking about, the problems that you have, or that you're doing that stuff. But actually what it does is, in being creative, in doing something else, you are kind of going down a different route. So maybe you will kind of think, oh, maybe I could do that differently. Maybe I could rearrange my kitchen in a different way, whatever it is. So it's a kind of contemplation tool. It's almost like when you see people, when they do the, portrait artist of the year and all the rest of it, and they go into that space, and you kind of think, how can they spend 4 hours and produce something that looks like 3 lines? Well, that's what's happening. There's a bit of a contemplation going in, and they're thinking, how can I solve this problem, and all the rest of it,
because it feels like you're accessing part of the sort of exercising part of your brain, or something that you don't often. And that, so it's not just a distraction, get away and go for a walk for a bit, which is not useful. It's almost like it's taking you into a space right away from the world, which means that that moment when you the eureka moment that comes when you're doing something different, and you suddenly remember the answer to a problem, or you work out something
because you've been thinking about something else. You suddenly remember where you left the keys, whatever it is. So there's that. And also it talks about, the other one is self-development, because if you do something and you really like it and you enjoy it and you produce something, however it is, it's about building self-esteem and confidence. So there's 3 really important elements. So one, it's just a distraction. If life is a bit too difficult, you know what, I am just going to bake a cake.
And you must have a lot of benefits, like losing the stress. I mean, your heart rate must change, and things like that must be greatly released.
And it talks about managing clinical mental health conditions, promotes positive mental health, all these different things. So that whole thing about it, it's doing this kind of feel good, the feel good test, and they talk about that. So there were those 3 different things. So it says, here we go, live face-to-face activities such as singing in a choir or taking part in a group painting class were the most effective. So those things, if you do it in a group, because human beings at root are social animals. So if you do it in a group, and it says even on isolated online creativity will lead to a positive impact.
Yeah.
So it's almost like if you can't do that, then then don't worry about it. Doing it on your own is you're going to get something out of it. It is going to create all those lovely endorphins or whatever's kind of going in.
Yeah.
And then, but if you do it in a group, it's even better.
Yes.
So
it must be that shared experience, because we're learning and developing. It's developmental is what you're describing. It's not a static world.
Yeah.
It's a very movement world, isn't it?
It is.
Creativity is in. It feels really good. How is so you would recommend starting one of these things if you were to do the if somebody was saying, because we've got the barriers and beliefs, we can all do it. I get that.
Well, we haven't no, let's I'm gonna talk about that in a bit more detail.
Okay.
So my thought would be the next thing is to deal with that question. And I'm going to ask you this. All right.
Okay.
Being here she is, because she's our poster girl for I'm not creative.
I'm not creative.
Do you think we're naturally creative? Are we born with it? And if you're not born with it, then that's it. Where do you think you are on that scale?
Well, I guess you're challenging my definition, which starts with painting. But I guess creativity is to some extent all learning. But I think some people are born with it more than others.
Okay. There's no wrong answer here.
Okay, I was looking to get it wrong.
Right.
I think the thing, I sort of have avoided creative types because I'm not one of them, as I'm being told I'm not one of them. But the more I come across people,
there's somebody who's actually taking on her first acting role. Just saying.
But I think that there's different ways of finding that space and creativity.
So you're a bit like Animal Farm, are you? Some pigs are just more equal than others.
I think there's a little bit of that going on.
Yeah.
But I do think that we need to learn what I personally like to do.
Yeah.
Now, many years ago, there was a book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by someone called Betty Edwards.
Okay.
Who had a massive belief, and she was my very first challenger about 30 years ago.
Right.
Because I can't draw. Somebody brought me this book and threw it at me. And she said, everyone can draw, but not everyone sees things.
Oh.
So when you find that you can see, in other words, you unlock yourself. If you can write the alphabet, you can make every single shape to do a perfect painting.
Right. So you're kind of that,
like we can make the angles.
Yeah.
And we do have this ability, but it's all asleep.
Yeah.
So perhaps we are all born with it, but some people, I think it comes down to being told at an early age.
Yeah. I think that's true. And so in terms of naturally creative, you're kind of yes, aren't you?
I kind of
think we are,
but I'm probably not me.
No, but you're kind of thinking. You're thinking no. But I think what you're saying is that from that early age, you kind of thought, no, if I don't have it, I don't have it.
Yes,
and since then, you've kind of a little bit chipped away from that because you have that core belief.
It's
you don't
hard.
have it, you have it.
Yeah,
and I think this is true that most people have it. That you have it or you don't.
Yeah.
Picasso, he was obviously a very, or Georgia O'Keeffe, they were absolutely unique in their abilities, and only they, could produce that.
Yeah.
However, I would think, and I kind of met a guy once where I talked about, it was a guy called Andy Green, and his thing was being creative, and he's still out there doing his thing. Andy, great. But he said, no, you can teach creativity. And I remember having him come in to do sessions with my students who are doing PR. And he did this brilliant exercise at the beginning where he gave them all a piece of paper, and he said, right, you're going to make a paper aeroplane. So they all made a paper aeroplane. And then he said, right, now throw that paper aeroplane to somebody, right? And of course, what do paper aeroplanes, they go everywhere. And he said, well, that's what it's like. You kind of start with the same thing and it could just go anywhere. And that's what you're doing. Is that difference between, oh, I'm going to go here. Oh, I'm just following a ball of string. So he was that how he got them to start thinking about creativity. How good was that? It was great. So the first thing that happens is, like you being told you're not creative. You have that kind of belief at the beginning. And I always look at it, I always have that story about, you know, when I was 7 and the teacher said to me, what do you want to be? And I said, I want to be an author. And she kind of went, no, dear. And then you'd have to be an authoress. Doesn't sound as great, does it, really, as an author? And you're not going to make any money on it. So think about something else. So that was that moment at 7, at the age of 7. And we probably had somebody say that to us at some point. If you think you're not creativity, there's something back there, or somebody's looked at this. So like my mum used to make me, with the leftover bits of pastry. I used to make gingerbread men and all the rest of it. And I thought this was great. And I remember once coming into the kitchen saying, where are my gingerbread men, or whatever it was? And she went, oh, well, I just threw them away because they were just bits of pastry.
They were horrible bits of nothing.
So you produced something that you thought was pretty bloody damn good. And somebody's went, oh, yeah, well, I'll just put that in the bin then.
Yeah.
So something has said to you, I'm not good enough. I'm not creative. I'm not as creative as other people. And a bit like you're talking about, a bit of a perceptual block when you produce something. Well, that isn't good enough, is it?
It's not what proper creatives
It's not proper creatives, And here's a good one: staying in the comfort zone. Because if you don't ever come out of your comfort zone and you say, I'm not creative, and you don't ever try it, then you're pretty safe there, aren't you? Because you get to be right.
It's very interesting, because I can remember doing art and I had to give it up. I was told to give it up. I didn't do it at O level because I was so rubbish. But it was like, draw a picture. Like, of what?
Yeah.
Whatever you feel.
Oh, that is conceptual.
So for 4 weeks, because it was a month-long thing, I had a blank bit of paper because I just couldn't think. I was told I wasn't creative, and then I thought, well, what do you draw a picture of? What do I need to draw a picture of? Why would I draw a picture? But instead of going back to find that inner self and grow it, it was almost like start from the point of view that you can draw everything and then go away and do something amazing.
So it's interesting, because it is like that thing. If you can get kids young enough and you say draw a picture, they'll just draw anything.
They will,
because they don't have that kind of cutoff.
No.
And I remember once seeing an exercise done with a group of kids where they played music. They played different kinds of music, and they just gave them a whole load of crayons. And they just said, listen to the music and just do whatever you think. And then they did the same thing where they turned the paper round and then, oh, now I'm drawing on this bit of paper and now I'm drawing on that bit of paper. So they had this huge thing that was made by this group of kids. And then they would change the music from like opera to something a bit more upbeat to something like this. And you could see, does that make you do something else? So that's linking that creativity to how you feel.
Yes. So
you're accessing, you're putting another thing in.
But nobody gave me a starting point.
No.
And so all I saw was a great white sheet of paper. And it's still, I mean, how old am I now? So this is 55 years ago, and it still stings.
Yeah.
I was such a failure.
Yeah.
I couldn't even think of what to draw.
No.
Because I didn't understand that it comes within. And I think, and I know we're talking about creativity, but it still is this midlife creativity, because you can come to midlife like I did and just go, well, I'm not creative. Good for you. You got a bit of time. This creativity in middle age means the kids are offhand. You can now use their bedroom to put your art and pastels in, and you can draw. And I really thought creativity in midlife was having the space and the crayons to do it. But it isn't.
Maybe.
It's really finding that space within you that you may not have had time to find.
So it's broadening what you think creativity is. And then, and kind of thinking about that. But I think it is that whole thing. And, cultural assumptions I've got here. So artists, it's not real work, is it? It's not a proper job. You say it doesn't really have any value. So, there's that kind of, I think there's a bit of an underlying thing that we got into that.
It's when people say,
what are you doing as people? Because I remember at some point when, Ella wanted to be an actress, and I remember my brother-in-law saying to me, And you're all right with that, are you? And I went, well, yeah.
Oh,
she wants to do that. Wants to do that.
Well, I used to say, somebody's got to be Johnny Depp. I mean, I'm picking on Johnny Depp, but it's just kind of like, you know, if everybody failed, we wouldn't have movies. So someone's got to succeed.
Someone's got to succeed.
we wouldn't have pictures. We wouldn't have.
Yeah, and he said, but look, she could get a job in the city. And I went, that's something which she has no interest in whatsoever. And why is it better to be a financial trader than it is to be an actress or an artist or a musician?
It's about. So do you think you need to be passionate to find your creativity?
Well, that's quite a good question about it, because it's like, I mean, in a sense, what do we then? So let's not go down the route of what the hell is passionate. What do we look at? How do we judge that? You know, and passion is often about, is feeling like there's some intensity there, isn't there? There has to be an intense feeling, you know, something like that. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure you need to be passionate about it, but I think it's valuable to look at your own perception of creativity and to maybe think, well, I could give it a go, even on that basis of, do you know what, I could give it a go, and if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But it doesn't work for me. Not, I'll draw a picture of, you know, a rose in a vase and it looks nothing like it, and then I put it in the bin, whatever it is. So there is almost a kind of thing like, so what do I be passionate about? But I think that it's a good starting point to think about, if I'm interested in this concept and I'd like to unlock it, if I'd like to think, you know what, maybe I would like to give this a go, then starting with looking at what you feel strongly about could be a good place to start.
So maybe passion is what we associate. If you're not passionate, don't bother, love.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas feeling strongly, and perhaps it gives you, as you say, excitement, but it could just bring you peace.
Yeah.
You know, so you could be very strongly feeling about something because it makes you feel very calm or very peaceful or connected.
Yeah.
You know, you can play a musical instrument, but if you join in, and I don't mean a structural orchestra, but if you just join in with a few people playing, it has a different connection. So you can find your creativity within that.
Yeah. And I think quite often, you know, I might say to people, where if you're going to start with this, maybe you start from, and these are extremes, like, what do you love, what do you hate? You know, what do you love? All right, I love, you know, and people, you know, what do you love? Chocolate, cake? I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. And then it's like, oh, you only got to look at the lovely Nadia, you know, there she was doing whatever she was doing. And then suddenly she's on Bake Off. And you're thinking, you look at that program and you think they must really want to have to bake something, because that looks like hell on earth to me.
Whereas
spending 12 weeks in that tent, you know.
Well, I would say to Nadia, how much to buy a cake so I don't have to bake it? So yeah, I think it is that it's something within you. And I like that analogy of, do I feel better for this or worse for this?
That's probably a better way to start.
And I think that's always good. When people say, I don't know what I want to be, I don't know, in a relationship, in a job, whatever, I always say, well, if you just take a 1% move on each decision, am I slightly better or slightly worse? You might have to make 100 decisions to get to the right top. You might be the lucky person that says, I definitely want to be that. But you might have to be a little person that does yes, no all the way along.
Could be either.
But they're still unlocking that inner self.
So there's that thing. So you can start with that kind of intellectual exercise. So you can start thinking about, what do I really like? What do I, you know, what makes me feel better? What do I not like? What makes me feel worse? Whatever. So can I go more in this side than that side? And the other thing, of course, is something that we do on the courses that we do, which is about create a vision board, because then you take it out of the intellectual side. So creating a vision board is a way of, you just look at.
So I've done this. So tell me a bit more about what we can sit here going when someone's going, what?
So vision board is where, so you take a whole load of magazines, to start with, and you just flip through them and you just think, oh, I quite like that. What appeals to you? So you're not thinking about it in that intellectual side. You're just responding to something. Oh, I like that. I like that picture. No judgment. I like that picture. It's a picture of a cake. It's a picture of a diamond ring. It's a picture of a swimming pool. It's a picture of a beach, whatever it is. So you just go through and you just pick out, you just do that. And I've also done it with things like when you see a headline that you quite like, and that can be something, you know, I had one and I saw one, it was just said highlights. It was probably about something to do with their hair, but I kind of thought highlights, that's quite a nice phrase, isn't it? So it's like, just go through and be open to what are you liking. Oh, that's a nice phrase, you know, let's take those out. So you take a whole variety of those and you have a pile of those wishing about. And then you take a plain bit of paper, could be an old bit of lining paper, a bit of, you know, wallpaper, whatever. And then you go through those pictures and you think, which ones what's my top picks? And thinking about it. And when people talk about a vision board, they often associate it with what would I like more of in my life?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's
I'd like more of this in my life.
Yes, you put your £6 million house up,
yeah,
and you're going to get that, and you think, oh, I think that's a lot of hoovering. I don't really want one like that big, but that's where I associate it. But actually, you're saying it's much more about finding you, really.
Yeah, and it is just, what do I want more of in my life? Oh, I'd like more cake. I'd like more shoes. I'd like more whatever it is. And this is just a way that you're accessing a different part of your brain. You're not accessing the intellectual, oh, I must write my 5-year goals. I must do that. What appeals to me visually? Which words I'd like? Let's see, which is my top picks, and I put those on. So that to me is always quite a useful first step, just to kind of unlocking that feeling of I'm not creative, I can't do anything.
I think it's
because that exercise is in itself creative.
It really is. And what you're saying is you're unlocking your truth.
Yeah.
I just as you were talking, I know this is a bit off topic with it, but we did, when I was many years ago, when I was at college being a homeopath, we had to do what we call a proving of chocolate, which is outside the scope of this conversation. Yes. But basically at 9 o'clock in the morning, we had a square of chocolate left on our desk, and we had to talk about it and visualize it and think about it. And I was just feeling more and more sick. And I was just like, I can't eat this. And then they said, and people are going, you can now eat your chocolate. People are going, oh my God, it's so lovely. And I wouldn't eat it. I just couldn't eat it. And it was interesting because then people turned on me and told me that I was being special and I was being clever, and you just really want it, but you want to be different. And I was just looking at it and I just realized I'm not that fond of chocolate.
Yeah.
And all these interesting meditation on chocolate was a really completely different creative ability.
Yeah.
But up until then, because everyone has said, chocolate is my chocolate. If we can have triple chocolate with chocolate on top and drink it with chocolate and then bathe in chocolate. And I was thinking, it's making me feel a bit sick.
The more you talked about it.
The more I talked about it, the more we contemplated it. And it was 9 o'clock in the morning, and I love chocolate with a glass of red wine in the evening. Just a square. But I couldn't, and what the reason I mentioned that is because you're talking about that vision board that brought that to me, that was like, well, you have to put your £6 million house on and you have to do that. Whereas actually, no, you might suddenly learn that I don't really like this bit. I like this bit. So it's an unlocking of something that you probably weren't aware of. That's the only reason I make that.
And because you've just thought about it visually and you haven't thought about it with a judgment on it and said, I must have this and this. And I ought to want that. I ought to want that.
Or a sentence, everybody likes chocolate. Everybody wants more. You've actually thought, there's something in my very being that prefers this, and so and I think that's a really good place to start. Have you got any other sort of tips?
Well, of course, this is where I kind of do that thing of saying I've got some really good things that I found out from other people.
Oh yes, exactly.
All right, so in terms of next steps, if you kind of do that and you kind of think, where would I like to start, where would I like to go, do I need some structure for this to give it a go? And what I would always recommend is, I love a woman called Julia Cameron, and she used to be married to Martin Scorsese, you know, so she was hanging out in a creative space. But she wrote a book called The Artist.
He did a few films, didn't he?
He did a few. He did a few. Something, I believe. I've heard of him. But I mean, she wrote this book called The Artist's Way.
Oh, yes, yes.
And what that is it's a self-administered 12-week course on unlocking your creativity.
Right.
Okay. And the first 6 weeks, so each week, you kind of look at a different kind of aspect of this. And I think it's almost like the first 6 weeks are unpicking what are your attitudes to creativity, art, all the rest of it. And she gives you, because there's one in there which is like, you know, what's your relationship with money? You know, have you associated it because you think art is worthless, because you're not going to, like my teacher said to me, oh, well, you're not going to earn any money as an art, you know, as a writer, so don't even try. So what is kind of going on with you about that? And so there's a load of different exercises, and you have to take yourself on an artist's date, just you, every week. And she does give you an idea of what you would do about this.
She doesn't give you a blank piece of paper and say,
no,
you've got 4 weeks to
one of these. No, I think there was one where it talks about spirituality, and it was like, go and so I remember when I was doing this, and it was something like, go and put yourself in a place, a spiritual place. And what was really weird was the week that I was doing it, I was doing a course up in Cardiff, and I was walking around, is it Butte Park or something like that, and I came across they were standing stones. There was a circle of standing stones. I went, oh, that's quite interesting, isn't it? I would say that is a spiritual place. And it was just a series of standing stones. And it wasn't, in a sense, it wasn't real, it wasn't ancient. It was just that they'd made this as a kind of installation. I thought, oh, so that's I'm going to put myself in the spiritual place for whatever it was. So she gives you the outline, and then you just interpret it the way you want to. You know, so that was good. So that was the first week. And the next 6 weeks are about where do you want to go in your life. And there was one exercise where it's almost like you make a list of all those professions that you wanted to be when you were a child, and then you look about which ones of these are you still interested in. And I think we've talked about this in Tales from the Shed. That was one of the things. But it was like, so if you but then you're like, I really wanted to be an astronaut, and then maybe it was an astronaut. It was that's one of your top 3, and then can you do something this week that might like be a bit like if you're an astronaut, you do it, and you don't have to necessarily go and do NASA training.
No,
but it might be
that would be annoying.
Maybe I go and I just sit outside and look at the stars, you know,
watch Apollo 13.
Yeah, okay, maybe not. That's probably definitely going to put you off. But and it was like, for me, I always wanted to be. I thought I wanted to be, Jacques. Apart from being an artist, an author, I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. I wanted to be a marine biologist, so I could go for a swim, or I could go to an aquarium, or I could whatever it is. So you do something that kind of is in that.
We're back to that sort of small yes/no thing again. Yeah, which is really good, isn't it? It's like, does this make me feel better? Yeah. Or closer to my goal, or does this make me feel a little bit further?
So I would say Julia Cameron is great. It's a good start in that sense. And she wrote another one which I quite like, which I think is called Walking in the World. So you have to do you have to walk, I think it's 20 minutes every day. Because as I then found out later, walking increases your creativity by something like 40 to 60%.
It does. I think we're back to that word distraction again. Because while your body is physically doing arms do arms things, legs do legs things,
and then your
creativity is going, I'm free. I'm not being restrained by my arms and legs. Yeah.
So I would say start with good old Julia Cameron. I think she's great. And then I've got another one here, which I think this is your fault, really. Because it's Hal Elrod, who wrote a book called Miracle Morning.
Yeah.
And this is a kind of thing we always use this in our training as well. And it talks about the power hour. So if you've got that ability to do that, and it's like, so it's 6 different things, and the acronym is SAVERS. And it's you do each one of them for 10 minutes. And so then you've got your power hour. So it's a way of starting off. So silence is the S, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing. So that's your savers.
Scribing is writing.
Yeah. So silence, be quiet, just have 10 minutes of quiet. It's quite interesting, not looking at your phone. Just 10 minutes of quiet, because actually that's quite a good way to start your day, isn't it, really?
Well, that's another sort of part of that little tiny voice that they're saying, because we tend to use silence in a distracted space, like looking at the phone and so on, which is not bad, but it's bad to do all the time.
Yeah.
We lose that edge of creativity. So kids can't, they're now saying it's changing brain development.
Yeah. So A is affirmations. Tell yourself, what are your encouraging words that you might use in the morning? And that's just, something that you're gonna feel better, overcome fears, be happy, even it's just like, I'm gonna have a good day. Maybe that's an affirmation.
Oh, it's enough.
I'm gonna have a good day.
We don't have to have a thee, a thou, and be sort of amazing.
No.
It could just be, I'm gonna have a good day.
I'm gonna have a good day. So so that's that one. So V is visualization. Imagine yourself, it says, doing everything you need to do and what it would be like to succeed. So that's a bit moving on from, if I'm going to have a good day, whatever. So you're visualizing what you're going to do. And we quite often catastrophize. I think, oh God, what happens if anything goes wrong? But actually just thinking, all right, so I know I've got to do this, this, and this. I'm just going to have an image in my mind.
I'm going to feel what it's like to sit in that room that the builders have finished. So I'm not going to get involved in all of the hassle. I'm just going to tell 2 minutes of thinking what it would feel like when I've got that chair with that view in that space, or whatever that happens to be.
That's good. And then E is exercise. Go for a walk, get moving in some way. Do 10 minutes of yoga. I don't know. It's like that kind of thing of, doesn't have to be run a marathon. 10 minutes, walk around the block. Then R is reading. And it says here, fill your brain with positive thoughts and thoughts to improve yourself. So reading, probably not a newspaper. I don't know, something maybe that's going to be inspiring. That book that you've been meaning to read forever, but just read it for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Just read 10 minutes worth of that.
Yeah.
And then kind of do that. And the last one, the F, as you said, S is scribing. Write a journal for 10 minutes. To just anything.
I think this is the thing a lot of people think, and I think we come back to creativity with this. It has to be worthy book, or it has to be a worthy set of writing.
No,
you could just do automatic writing.
Nobody's going to read it,
or what I'm planning to do today, or why am I feeling. It could be, why am I feeling like this and what led to it, or it could just be nothing in particular.
When Julia Cameron uses this in The Artist's Way, and there's one thing where you have to write the pages. You have to write I think I can't remember, 3 pages of A4 in the morning, which was the one thing I used to find hateful. And she said, when you can't think of anything to write, just keep writing. I can't think of anything to write until you can think of something to write.
Yeah.
So even that,
well, that's I've sat your
down,
brain, isn't it?
Yeah, I've sat down. I should be writing something important, but all I can think about is my shopping list or whatever. Well, write the shopping list. Do whatever it is.
Yes.
Scribing for 10 minutes.
Because that's got that link with the brain and the fingers, the creative actions at that end.
Yeah. And the final thing that I've got here, and I liked this. I found it on Tinternet, as you do, and it just says. It's a little infographic by something called layerform.com, and we might try and put a link to these in the on the chat. But it's like 40 ways to stay creative, and it just gives you 40 things. And the first one is 1, create an inspiration board. Okay, here we go. That's exciting, And then it says 2, get out more. So that's another thing.
I think that's a really nice thing to have. Put a link to that. Have you?
I've got a link to it. But it's like things like socialize, break your routine, listen to music, watch films, visit galleries, go to the theatre. So those are all different things. Question things. But that's making you creative. Turn off your phone for an hour, they say. Travel. Let go of fear. Be curious. Number 30. Have sex. There you go. If all else fails.
Preferably with someone else.
Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, declutter your workspace. So you know, those that
does put me in mood of something that I did try, which is there's lots of books written about this, but it's like say yes for a year. And there's recently a film that I did watch, it was very good, with Jim Carrey that was saying yes to all. And obviously it's a film, books have been written. But what I found, especially when I'm a bit fearful, is I try to say yes to one thing that I may have automatically said no to.
Yeah.
So every day, one goal I have is say yes, feel the fear, and do it anyway. So I would put that just from what you're saying on that list of creative. That's just another small suggestion of opening up a creativity that you haven't done, break a habit.
And so I do think that creativity is important. You know, I think it's important at any age, but I think at midlife and beyond, what we often find is because we are moving and changing, and you know, we might allow ourselves to be more creative.
I'm a great believer in the brain has different growth periods, just like our body has different changes, our brain does. And we tend to think the brain is really good about 25 and then just on a road to nowhere, which isn't the truth.
Going downhill,
which isn't the truth. I think it goes through different things, and it changes between 15 and 20, changes between 20 and 30. And my view on this is in your 40s-ish, midlife, our brains become creative. It's almost a space that they give you more opportunity to find it. So time may or may not let you, money may or may not let you, but I think your brain and the rest of your life is impacted by tapping into creativity, which is why, even if you're not a natural brilliant artist as you are with your galleries and so on,
Thank you, honey.
But it's like I think for all of us, we need to find the creativity, not fulfilling the rest of the life, but by fulfilling the rest of our life.
And it just kind of opens that up. So so that's where we are. So creativity, something to think about, you know.
Definitely something to think about.